Welcome to another edition of Boxing Info. I'm your host, The Islander, and I know this is a very late video. Somebody sent me a message saying it's a bummer I'm not making videos anymore, and I actually do want to. It's more finding the time to do it, and I'm not going to stop working in order to do it, so that's why I do these at work. Want to real quickly try to keep this as brief as possible. I want to go over a fight I didn't preview, and I know I said I was going to try to do it, and that was the fight between Andre Ward and Chad Dawson. And if I was going to basically predict that fight, I would have thought one of the two guys was going to win a very close nip and tuck decision. I did not think one was going to run ram shot over the other, which is what happened. And I also want to bring up that Andre Ward looked spectacular again. Chad Dawson looked like he was outmanned, outgunned, even for a guy who was bigger, coming down in weight from 175 to 168. I personally, before the fight, I didn't think much of it, but now after seeing the result of this fight, I don't think it's a good idea for guys to come down in weight to meet and champion to do that. And another example of when this happened, if you think way back to like 1993, 1994, James Toney was pretty much the undisputed 168-pound super middleweight king at the time, and Prince Charles Williams, who was the former IBF light heavyweight champion and a killer at light heavyweight, not passive like Dawson. This guy was a killer. Came down to meet Toney at 168, and Toney dominated him just like Ward dominated Chad Dawson, and basically knocked him out with like less than 30 seconds to go in the 12th round with a clean right hand. And we also saw this when Chris Bird decided he was going to move down from heavyweight to cruiserweight after a number of years being at heavyweight. Not a good idea, and I believe in my heart that Roy Jones's trouble started when he ventured up into the heavyweight division to beat John Ruiz and couldn't get fights made with Evander Holyfield or Mike Tyson. He moved back down to light heavyweight and ran into a real rough time with Antonio Tarver in their first fight, and then obviously got knocked out in his next two fights against Tarver and against Glencoff Johnson. I don't think it's a good idea to play with weight, and I think Dawson, for what it's worth, really underestimated how fast Ward was, and more importantly, this wasn't spoken about during the fight, and neither Dawson, even though he gave Ward all the respect in the world he could, didn't speak about this, and that is the distance control. A lot of you have brought up points about how well Andre Ward fights on the inside and transitions to the outside. It looks a lot like Hopkins, a lot like a lot of other fighters. He manages distance really well, and to land the left hand like he did against a slick southpaw like Chad Dawson means he was managing the distance correctly. I mean, his left hook was doing damage all night. His jab was working. Anything he wanted to do, he did, and Dawson had very little answer for it. I think going into this fight is that I was going to suggest I thought maybe Dawson would win the fight by a decision, but by a very tenuous decision. But at the same time, I was thinking in my mind, what does he have that he can keep Ward off of him with? And the answer is not really much. I mean, so a classic southpaw 1-2 jab left hand, and once Ward was able to neutralize that, he basically walked right through Dawson. I'm very surprised at the result. I just want to be clear about that. I'm very surprised. I would have probably lost money betting on this fight, but it was a great, great win. It was a career-defining win for Andre Ward. My thing is, I really want to see him venture away from California. There's only so much of this. So many fighters are going to be able to bring into Oakland to fight him, because the thing is that even though he's taking the play out of the judge's hands and things like that, there is going to be a fight where he is going to have to tough it out, and like many before him, he's going to basically get the nod by the decision of the judges, and somebody's going to be crying foul. I'm just saying he needs to, like Timothy Bradley, who fought like his first 20-something fights in California before venturing overseas to fight Junior Witter in England. Never fought out of California before that. I think Andre Ward needs to do that too. And I wouldn't, a lot of people asking who could beat him, this and that. I still think that styles make fights, and I really would like to see Ward fight a rejuvenated Lucian Butte. I know Butte, got slaughtered by Carl Frosch, who got slaughtered by Ward, but styles make fights, and there's something. I think that Butte is a way better southpaw than Chad Dawson is. he has more game and more pop and more aggression, even if it is passive aggression. I'd like to see Ward and Butte fight if it could be made. That brings us to this week's fight, in which Saul Canelo Alvarez is fighting Joselito Lopez, or whatever his name is, that just beat up on Victor Ortiz. A lot of people are hoping for a good fight. I'm hoping for a good fight. And my thing is with Lopez, I think that this might be the striking of the clock, because it's one thing to go fly under the radar against Victor Ortiz, who always has one foot out, most of the time has one foot out the door anyway. It's another thing to do it against somebody who's very, very hungry, and that is Saul Alvarez. I'm looking at Alvarez to win this fight, possibly by a very wide decision. If not by like a cuts or a corner retirement of some sort. I don't think that Lopez, who is eventually coming up from 140, now fighting this fight at 154, is going to be able to handle the firepower. And what I really envision happening in this fight, those of you who might remember way back when Miguel Cotto was a prospect, they put him in with a guy named Victoriano Sosa, who had given Mayweather fits for 12 rounds. I mean, Mayweather beat him in defense of his WBC lightweight title relatively handily, but he was there, he was in the fight in every round of the fight. Sosa was. Well, he moved up to junior welterweight to take on contender Cotto, and Cotto walked right through him. His body was not able to handle just the stress and the power of a true junior welterweight, and I'm wondering if the same thing's going to happen when Canelo Alvarez basically starts putting pressure on him, and he starts feeling his punches. I'm going with Alvarez in this fight. And of course, the other card is going to be the on the HBO side of town. Is going to be the I was going to say unified, but really it's the linear middleweight championship of the world with the WBC belt on the line too, in which linear middleweight champion Sergio Marinella, is it Marinella? Maravella, I'm sorry. Gabriel Martinez, is taking on Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I know most of you think that this is going to be an absolute whitewash for Martinez, and I'm here to tell you I think you're wrong. I would venture to guess that Martinez is probably going to squeak the fight out or win the fight. But don't be surprised and don't sleep on Junior, because I think that this is one of those rare instances where youth, less skill than the older veteran, Father Time is going to be more amenable to the younger. And I always quote the great motivational speaker Anthony Robbins, who always says, the past does not equal the future, but it's a very good indicator of what the future is going to be. And if that is the case, I draw back on a fight in the lightweight division a long time ago, real long time ago, in which IBF champion Freddie Pendleton, who was basically, before he won a title, nothing more than a club fighter. He had double-digit number of losses, but like a lot of boxers, once he won the lightweight championship of the world, he became went up 2 or 3 notches. He was defending his title against a very young, very promising prospect named Rafael Ruelas. And right from the start, it looked like the mismatch everybody thought it was going to be, just like this fight, until Ruelas got his feet under him and dug in hard. Personally, I'm not sure he deserved to win the fight by 4 or 5 rounds like the judges had it, but the grit and determination and the effort that he showed eventually wore the champion down. And Pendleton went from almost scoring a first-round knockout to barely holding on for his life at the end of the fight. And what I'm saying here is that they were both in top condition, both just like these guys. One guy wanted it a lot more. And if we're looking at these guys and looking at their recent matches and things of that nature, look at it this way. Martinez looked fabulous against Paul Williams in losing a split decision. He looked even spectacular, and he's been basically elevated to mythical proportions. Mythical proportions now after knocking out Paul Williams with one punch, and then knocking down Sergey Zinzurek 5 times in 8 rounds. But he's looked very pedestrian in his last 2 fights. Very pedestrian. Against Darren Barker and against Matthew Macklin, he was in some difficulty. In one fight he had his nose broke. The other fight he was being outworked at certain times in those fights. Understand this, I'm not going to get into a pissing contest with any of you comparing Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. with Macklin or with Barker. I think that Jr. would hold his own with both of them, and I think he's got somewhat of a size advantage over both Martinez and those guys. With that said, Jr. also possesses one of the weapons needed to beat a good southpaw, and that's a very good lead right hand that he must have inherited from his father, as well as a left hook to the body. Now, how do I see this fight going? If Martinez is in his right mind, he's properly motivated, and he's properly trained, he will box this fight from the outside and not dare let Jr. in his chest or on top of him. If he establishes his jab as well as he did against Zinzurek, remember Zinzurek was known for his jab, and Martinez turned the tables on him and basically undressed Zinzurek by out jabbing him and just totally nullifying any offense that Zinzurek had. This is what Martinez has to do, and probably will do against Chavez Jr., is basically establish his jab, establish a distance, pop shot with left hands as Chavez is trying to bore in, and basically either tie up, outwork, reset. And that pattern should reset itself over and over and over again. But, like with Freddie Pendleton and Rafael Ruelas, if Chavez Jr. is willing to walk through fire and brimstone to win this fight, and from what I understand in the lead up to this fight, it's been very personal between these two, especially some of the comments that Martinez has made to Chavez Jr. about him living off his father's name and all this other kind of stuff. The situation I have personally with this is, I've always been a massive fan of Chavez Sr. Chavez Jr. is really not even a shadow of his father. Let's call it like it is. But Martinez, on the other hand, has been elevated to these epic levels in people's minds, top pound for pound list, this and that. And I'm thinking it's a lot of it's to do with boxing is so shallow these days in the past few years that we have to grasp onto something that we believe. The Pacquiao people, some of them think that he could beat, Sugar Ray Robinson and all these other fighters. That's one group. The Mayweather people think he's the greatest of all time and all this stuff. And then there's this group who almost have me laughing when they don't compare, but they talk as if Martinez belongs in the same sentence as Hagler and Monzon and even Hopkins for that matter. And personally, I have to say no, he doesn't. He's very good. He's an A-level fighter. He is in the elite class right now. But when all is said and done, I have seen chinks in his armor that I didn't see in Marvin Hagler's until he got really old. And if you remember correctly, his own countryman, Carlos Monzon, won his last 80-something fights. The situation is this. Don't be surprised if Junior wins this fight. Don't be surprised if Junior somehow stops Martinez, too. I think people are very much underselling Junior's demeanor or his hunger to win this fight. I'm going with Martinez by the slightest of margins. Don't be surprised if Junior wins. You heard it here first. Skills-wise, the advantage goes to Martinez. Age and size goes to Chavez Jr. Skill, like I said, to Martinez. But Freddie Pendleton was way more skilled than Rafael Ruelas, and will and youth was served that night. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully I'll be back to recap it. Hopefully this is going to be a good fight. It's been very anticipated. Hopefully it'll be high contact. And hopefully we'll have a definitive result. That's going to do it, folks. Thanks.